Okay. Hi everybody. I hope you've had a lovely holiday and you also enjoyed our first screencast explaining a bit about the course. Here we are, ready to go straight into our very first content video, which is connected to what is good writing. So grab a pen or a pencil and a piece of paper, and if you want to make some notes as we go through, that would be fantastic. Okay, the title of today's session was originally What's Good Writing, but I want to stretch this a little bit and talk about what makes a piece of great writing, and of course, by extension, what you can do to make your own writing great as well. So writing is one of those things that can either be really intimidating or really, really fun, so I also want to focus on what makes writing fun, what makes writing rock. So, really, being a strong, confident and capable writer, basically being good at it, makes it a whole lot more enjoyable and a lot more rewarding. So, I'd like that to be really one of the outcomes of this course, that the process of writing becomes more rewarding and more enjoyable as we work through the skills needed to do it well. So, I'm going to play a little bit of music and you can have 1 minute of thinking time, and I want you to write down 3 things that make a really good piece of writing. And one of the great things about screencasts is that I get to pick the music, so no complaining please. You have 1 minute to think. Ready, steady, go!
Hacerte mía, me destruye la incertidumbre que estoy pasando. Es que la nieve cruel de los años mi cuerpo enfría y se me agota ya la paciencia por ti esperando. Y se me agota ya la paciencia por ti esperando. Y a veces yo te levanté al rayar el día y que el idilio perdure siempre al llegar la noche. Cuando venga la aurora llena de goce.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, time's up. What I'm hoping is that you wrote down a couple of the same things that are on my list of the things that I look for in terms of language and organisation when I'm marking a piece of writing, whatever the subject is. All of these things are important for a biology report, a physics or a maths investigation, or for an English or history essay. The questions are the same about the way that the language is used across all of your subjects. So, some of the words might be a little unfamiliar, so I want to start by asking some questions to make the concepts clear. Let's move first of all to coherence, which is a really important part of communicating with a reader. Anytime that you're writing, you have to remember that writing isn't just about putting your ideas on a piece of paper. It is a communication, an active communication with another person. What makes it tricky is that that person can't respond to you or tell you that he doesn't understand, which makes it so different to speaking to someone face to face. What it means is that you need to express exactly what you mean in a very logical order to really communicate with that person that you're speaking to through your writing. Unfortunately, a lot of the time people just write down their thoughts in whatever order they come in, which is absolutely fine if you are the only person reading this writing. At least you understand the organisation of your own ideas. However, not everybody can always follow your chain of ideas if they aren't organised with the reader in mind. I don't want to try and read your thoughts. What I want you to do as a writer is to organise them so it's easy for me as a reader to understand them. So, in really great writing, the pressure is on the writer to communicate, not on the reader to decode what he's saying. And coherence is about helping that person who's reading understand what ideas you're trying to express. To understand if a piece of writing is coherent, you need to ask yourself these questions. Does the order make sense? Does the writer jump around? Is there a sequence? Is there a path? If there is a path through the writing, then it's coherent. Basically, if when I read your writing, I feel like I'm in the middle of all of these ideas in a big messy ball, then it's going to create a strain. But when the ideas are organised like this, you have a happy reader, happy days and happy grades. Okay, moving on from coherence to range, writing is an amazing opportunity to show the reader what you know in terms of language and how you can apply your language to the task. However, again, so many students don't really show what they know. They have an advanced level of language, but they play it safe when they write, using simple structures and basic vocabulary. This gives the reader the impression that the language of the writer is actually quite a low level. If you imagine that this piece of writing is your only interaction with the reader, you have to think about what kind of impression you want to give that reader about your level of language. So to give the best possible impression, the key word is variety. You need a variety of high-level structure and variety of high-level vocabulary to show that you have a high level of language. That means you can't just write instinctively. It means you also have to make really conscious and informed decisions about the structures and vocabulary that you're using. You have to choose the best and most varied language to suit the task and communicate to the reader, not just the first thing that pops into your mind. Okay, so thinking about accuracy, another really important aspect of great writing, not the only aspect, but a really important one. If your writing isn't accurate or correct, then there can be a breakdown in communication. Everybody makes slips or errors when they write, especially when they're writing in a second or third or even fourth language as you guys are, and it's nothing to be embarrassed about as long as you take the information that you have about your errors and about your slips and move forwards. First of all, you need to know that there is a difference between a slip and an error. A slip is something that you know is wrong, but in the moment that you say it or write it, when you're feeling a little bit pressured, it just comes out and then afterwards you kick yourself saying, oh, I knew that. For example, a lot of people write he have instead of he has. They do know the right way to say this, but they just forget in the moment. This is a slip, but you you must develop the ability to self-correct your slips. You should not be making the same mistakes, same slips again and again and again, and it's your responsibility as a writer and as a language learner to fix them. Think about that poor reader again. But the problem does come when there are errors. Errors happen when you don't know the reason that something's wrong or you haven't been taught the language. So in this case, it's virtually impossible to correct yourself, and it's virtually impossible not to make the same errors again and again. So if something about your language is wrong and you don't know the reason why, you have to ask your ALD teacher to explain this, and then your language accuracy will improve. The thing is, only you know if something is a slip or an error, and you have to take the action to find out the correct way to write things if you want to improve your language accuracy. The only way to do this is to ask. I can tell you that the number of students, this is depressing but very true, the number of students who have come to my office to help them correct their errors, not their slips but their errors, is a big fat 0. So, to improve your accuracy, you have to take advantage of the support that there is. Let's move on to think about another area which makes writing great. Cohesion is what glues your writing together in terms of grammar. This refers to connectors, as well as a number of other things like referencing, pronouns, word order, clause types, lots of other fun stuff that we're going to look at. However, as a taster, let's have a think about connectors. It isn't just enough to know the connector, but you also have to know what the grammar of the connector is to use the words effectively. For example, what is the difference between despite and although? Lots of people know the words, but do they know what comes afterwards? Despite having been to the cinema, or although he had been to the cinema, what's the difference and why? Okay, collocation talks about the way you put words together. Why do we say things in the way that we do? Again, we're going to look a little bit at this a bit later on in the course and how to use an online concordance to help you with this. But as a reader, when people use the wrong collocations, it feels like this. Something's wrong, but you don't immediately know what it is. Okay, let's think about register, which is another area that can make the difference between blah writing and great writing. Thinking about register requires the person who is writing to make a conscious decision, another conscious decision, about the tone and terminology that they're going to use, so that the reader doesn't have any strange surprises as they read the text. In this next area, we're really thinking about how focused you are in your writing. Can you answer the question? Or have you completed the task fully and completely with no extra or unnecessary or irrelevant information? So, when you're looking at a piece of writing, it's a great idea to ask these questions to see if you have really achieved the task and hit the target, or if you're just kind of shooting your arrows around more or less in the direction of the question. I want to go back a minute and think specifically about the reader again. It's such an important part of writing that it's definitely worth mentioning Again, when you think about the impact on the reader, you have to put yourself in the shoes of that person and imagine that you're reading the writing for the very, very first time. Does the reader react in the way that you want them to? If you're writing a horror story, you probably want the reader to feel tense or scared. But if the reader laughs, falls off his chair and rolls around on the floor, I think it's fair to say that you have not had the desired impact on the reader. So the idea is to make sure that the effect that you want is actually the same one as the effect that you actually have. This can be really hard, especially when you are so involved in your own writing. But the idea is to picture who you're writing for and what you want to achieve. Keep that in mind while you're reading and especially while you're editing your work, because this is another feature that makes the difference between writing that works and writing that really doesn't. So always remember who you're writing for. Okay, this is an area that's quite easy to think about, I think. Basically, you need to make sure that the way that your writing looks is the way that it should look. An essay should look like an essay. A mass investigation should look like a mass investigation. But in order to do that, you have to know what are the features of that genre. What's it supposed to look like? For example, if an essay looks like one long piece of thought, then it's not going to help the reader and can actually be very irritating. And even the reader might not want to finish reading, which is absolutely not what you want. So, appropriate layout and organisation supports the reader. End of story. The last area I want to talk about is punctuation, punctuation, punctuation. Get used to it, love it, and learn how to use it really effectively, and the doors of writing will be open forever. I've already mentioned that writing is not the same thing as speaking, and it sounds very obvious, but this is why punctuation is so important to your writing. When you're speaking, you have lots of tools. You have body language, pronunciation, facial expression, tone of voice, speed of speech. The list goes on and on and on. But when you're writing, you don't have any of those tools to express yourself to the reader. I mean, you can actually make funny faces when you write, but of course no one's actually going to see them, and it would be quite embarrassing if they did. So what we have instead is punctuation. The little marks and dots look like they don't really matter, like they're not very important, but they are what help you to really, really communicate with the reader who can't see or respond to you. The problem is that when punctuation isn't used properly, it has the opposite effect. It can confuse and not clarify what you're trying to say. Another complication is that conventions are different in different languages. Sometimes what works in Spanish doesn't work in English and vice versa. But what is clear is that whatever language you're writing in, you have to know the convention, and that punctuation needs to be used effectively to support the reader so that they can understand what you're trying to communicate. If you can master this aspect of your writing, you can achieve a really high level of writing, which is fantastic news. Okay, so let's look at a piece of writing that doesn't show any of the features. This sample is an introduction to the essay, Do Schools Kill Creativity? Just read through. You have a minute.
Siempre al llegar la noche, y cuando venga la aurora llena de goce, se fundan en una sola tu alma y la mía.
Okay, so after you read that, what did you think? What did you feel when you read the writing? What impression did you have of the writer? Did you think he was organised? Did you feel like he was writing for you or just putting his thoughts on the paper? Okay, now let's look at a different sample which answers the same questions. Let's have a look at how different they are. Again, you've got a minute to read it.
Siempre al llegar la noche, y cuando venga la aurora llena de goce, entre tú y yo se fundan en una sola tu alma y la mía. Se fundan en una sola tu alma y la mía.
Okay, brilliant. This brings us to the end of this video and the start of your work. Basically, before our first session on Monday, you need to go back to those 2 sample paragraphs and find as many differences as you can. Bring your ideas to our first session. Also to that first session, you need to bring 3 pieces of your writing so that we can really start thinking about how to apply what we've looked at to your own reflection and writing process. Okay, this is very important. You must bring your own work. It can be from any subject. Okay. Alright, so as always, I am sending you a big fat cheesy grin from me and Katia, and we're looking forward to seeing you in our first session with your 3 pieces of writing so that we can start moving forward to make your writing not just blah or okay or good, but fantastically great. Okay, so ciao for now, and we will see you in our first session. Thank you.